Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
What's the creepiest shit that has happened to you?
I have a lot of messed up stories related to my blood bond with my father's family. Context: because of my family heritage, I have a sixth sense. I can hear, see, and feel things that aren't in this world. I have learned how to control this sixth sense a bit. Sometimes I have predictions, but this ability works whenever it wants and usually is for very stupid things. I will write down a very soft anecdote I have. I have to mention it may be a soft one, but it is the very first creepy as hell one related to this sense and the heritage, in another comment because it is long. 7 or 8 years old. Me and my father were driving home. He parked the car. I saw my mom's car with the inside lights on. I approached the car, saw my aunt's dog Canelo inside, took it and went inside the house. Went to the kitchen and got out through the door that goes directly to the yard. In my house there's a balcony where you can access through my room, and you can also see it from the yard. At that moment I started feeling weird about the balcony. For a reason I still don't know, I said to Canelo, "Don't worry, bud. There's no ghost here who can bother me." Suddenly I felt a need to turn around and look behind me. Oh shit, .jpg. I was little, so I just obeyed, ignoring the obvious danger alert I was receiving from my instincts. Maybe for innocence, maybe for being an idiot. I turned back and looked straight at the balcony. A big white face was looking at me. I do not remember very well, but there was something standing there. I can barely remember a face. I turned around fast and looked at the door. My body wasn't responding. What the hell? .jpg. I was paralyzed by fear. Somehow I got enough strength to raise an arm and open the kitchen door. Got inside as fast as I could, shocked. Without looking up, I put Canelo outside, immediately ran away. I was crying in fear. Don't know why, but I felt the need to call my aunt, sister of my mother, who is like a second mother to me. Went directly to get the phone, dialed the number of my aunt as fast as my fingers can. She answers, "Auntie, I need your help." She was obviously worried. "What happened, sweetie?" I told her what I saw. No answer. She got silent for a while. She asked me if I was all right. I told her yes. She told me to wait for a minute. I did. 2 minutes later, she came and told me to repeat after her a prayer in Spanish called the Magnificat. I did without asking. She calmed me, and after a few minutes talking, we ended the call. Fast forward to sleep time. Told my father about what I saw. He becomes silent. "Okay, Anon, listen to me." He told me to always say a prayer in Spanish called El Padre Nuestro whenever I see something like that or whenever I feel in danger. Fast forward to us preparing ourselves to sleep. I'm in my room scared as shit about the door of the balcony. He opens the door to go to the balcony. I cried and begged him not to go out. "I don't want the ghost to harm you." He tells me to calm down, and after that he goes through the balcony door. Hear his steps, hear a big slam. I assume it was him kicking the metal fence of the balcony. The metal fence was in the part where you can see the yard, where I saw the thing. After that, I hear him yelling, "I don't want you to keep bothering my kid." He comes inside and closes the door. I was confused and scared. He smiles at me and tells me it was time to sleep. He and I slept with my feet where my head should be because if we were laying normally, I could see the door of the rooms. My parents' room and mine are separated by a door frame, but without a door and by the position of my bed I could see the door where you can access the rooms. He falls asleep while holding me. I still cannot sleep because of the obvious. After a while I start to fall asleep. Suddenly I hear something. It was the door opening. God damn it, .jpg. Open my eyes completely, don't move, just keep hearing. It was the door of the room opening. I clearly heard it opening completely because it had something like a carton or plastic at the bottom of it, maybe to avoid the entering of insects or just to avoid the door getting opened by the air so easily. That plastic carton thing at the bottom makes a noise when you move the door, like a broom, and that's why I realized what was happening. I remembered what my father told me. starting to pray like a crazed priest, repeating the Padre Nuestro again and again in my mind and whispering, "Stop hearing noises. Wait a bit and then gather all the courage I had. Move in the bed and look behind me, straight to the door." It was completely shut. I even saw it was closed with the latch. Lay again and curl up with my dad. Fall asleep soon. Well, boys, that was the anecdote. Try to put yourselves in that situation. It was pretty screwed up.
Be me, 7 years old, staying a few nights at my mom's friend's new house on our way to South Florida. Mom's friend is going through marriage troubles that she says started when they moved to the new place. Later find out husband was being verbally and physically abusive to both her and their daughters. First night at the house, I go to the entertainment room after dinner. There's a piano in there, which I go to play as I had been taking lessons. Think I see someone watching me from my peripheral vision. Turn and see a small, dark shadow scale the wall really fast, jumping from the floor to the ceiling. Immediately tell my mom, who is devoutly religious. Mom prays for protection over me and sends me upstairs to bed. Don't sleep very well. Have a nightmare that a tiger is chasing me through the jungle until it catches me and eats me alive. Wake up in a cold sweat. Need to pee. Stumble through the dark bedroom. Find my way to the door. Get spooked by the creaky hinges. Turn on every light I can find on the way to the bathroom. Weird, uneasy feeling. Afraid to look in the mirror in the bathroom. Shuffle back to my room. Turning off lights along the way. Past the staircase. Look down the staircase. 6-foot-tall, dark shadow figure standing on the bottom step. Start crying and screaming. Her friend's husband comes out of his room by the staircase. Tells me to stop crying and it was probably just a bad dream without even asking what I saw. Look at his arm while he's hugging me. The tiger tattoo freaks me out even more. I think they divorced the year after that, but thinking back on that story still gives me the chills.
A couple of years ago, I was sleeping at my parents' house. My dad was out for the night because of work, so I was alone with my mom. It was about 12 a.m. in late winter, and my mom decided to smoke a cigarette before going to bed. She always goes out of the house when smoking because she knows how bad it is for the people around her. Fast forward 20 minutes, I started hearing voices from outside. I was laying on the sofa. To my left, there was a fireplace, and behind that wall, another house where a couple lives. I started hearing these voices for minutes, curious. I tried my best to focus my ears and hear what they were saying, but I couldn't understand anything. Where I live, all the local older people speak a very weird dialect that I have never learned, so eventually, I shrugged it off and thought my mom was discussing the day with them since she's very lively and always talks loudly with people, and I kept browsing my phone. After a while, my mom came back from her smoke break, and she was all quiet. She just got in bed, close to mine, and said goodnight. I asked her, "I thought that couple only came here during summer. Are they staying longer this year?" And she answered me, "What couple?" I asked again, "That couple that lives right by us. You weren't talking to them earlier." She answered, "I wasn't talking to anyone." I replied, "Didn't you hear any voices from the house? They were speaking so loudly I could hear from here, so you heard them too, I guess." My mom said, "I didn't hear anything. It was dead quiet outside. Maybe you need to catch some sleep." You can't believe how terrified I was. But this one I'm about to tell is even more scary. These are the only two weird things that ever happened to me. A year later, I was spending the night in the house again, still on that couch. The couch faces the back door to our garden vertically, so when you lie down, the door is in plain sight. I was gathering and getting the blankets in place. Always winter, very cold here. You won't believe how cold it is. I can stay in a tank top at 5 degrees Celsius, but during winter, if I don't have heavy blankets, I can't even sleep, even with the fireplace going. Imagine how cold it is outside. And about to lie down when I heard 3 loud knocks on the door in front of me. First, I was like, Then the realization set in, and I was about to shit a huge brick on the spot. Then I remembered my dog loves to stay outside in the garden, and he has a very weak bladder. Pisses everywhere. So my mom always tends to let him outside to play and do his business. My dog also knocks with his nose whenever he wants to get inside. So I thought to myself, oh, Mom forgot the dog outside again, and got a bit mad. I called for my dog. No response. Since I'm not stupid, I tiptoed to gain more height and checked the door. No sight of the dog, no shadow, nothing. I called my dog again, and then I saw the blankets behind me move. I almost had a heart attack, but then saw a familiar face. My dog. He was inside, hiding under the blankets the whole time. I felt relieved for a moment, then panicked. WTF just knocked on the door then? I tried to calm down, checked all the doors were locked, and stared down at my mom, sleeping. I decided not to wake her up because she's very superstitious and paranoid. I went to bed, my senses literally going crazy for hours the whole night before eventually dazing off. A couple of months passed, and my sister and I started talking about the weird stuff that happened to us during our lives. I brought up this incident, laughing. Yeah, and then this happened, haha. I guess it was the wind or something, but I got super scared that day. My sister freezes and looks dead me in the eyes, and she tells me that one day our mom told her that after our grandpa died, she and our dad heard 3 loud knocks at the door late at night. Apparently, our grandpa was known in the family to always knock on the door with 3 very loud bangs, and my mom always got mad at him because he had bad hearing and couldn't understand how loud he was banging the door. The knocks I heard on that door were exactly like that. 3 very loud bang, 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 and the sound was coming from the upper end of the door. My grandpa was very tall. I immediately got chills, and to this day, I think this was my grandpa. He was a very lovely and adorable man who always wanted to be with his family and tried his best to bring us all together during festivities. At the time this happened, he had been dead for a very short time. After this, my sister told my mom about this, and then later that day, she came to me very angry because I didn't tell her and warned me to never open the door when something weird like this happens to me again in the future. These are the only weird things that have ever happened to me. I tried my best to make it readable. Sorry, I'm ESL.
When I was a child, we lived in a rural town. Everything was basically DIY. The house was jerry-rigged like crazy. The water heater had its own room with a dilapidated floor. Underneath, you could see a giant hole. It was just there, about 5 feet deep, 4 feet wide. One day, our grandpa was called over to fix whatever was wrong with it. He told us somehow one of us kids dropped a toy down there, a wheel with an arrow on it, the type you crank a lever and it spins to an animal to make the sound. He tried to get it, but it was too far down. After that, the adults swore any time they went in there, they could hear music playing from it, like a melody. Sometimes even gunshots. All us kids ever heard were the sounds it was stuck on. The lion and the pig. This was freaky at night when you passed the door. You could hear the pig snorting. Well, years later, my siblings and I figured out our grandfather was a Minecraft YouTuber, due to all the accounts that started to surface from all the kids we grew up with. Anyway, now that we think about it, that wheel didn't belong to any of us, and we don't know how it got there. The house has since been demolished, and our grandpa is gone. We went back to find the hole, but it has been leveled out. I guess they filled it in due to it being a hazard. Now that I remember the childish yet ominous noise it played, I can't help thinking about my grandpa's actions. It makes me feel gross. We go back to that lot every now and then to remember our childhood, but if I ever find that wheel buried there, I'm gonna shit myself.
A few years ago, I was visiting my mother at the house I grew up in. My best friend from high school still lived in town, so we got together for a few beers. My mother's house is only about a mile from the high school we went to, so my friend and I decided to walk up there at night and reminisce. We got there, and the parking lot was empty, but there was a light on in the admin building. Strange to us, but whatever. Maybe the lights were on a timer, or whatever. My friend went up to one of the windows on the admin building and used his knife to peel away a flyer advertising a dance coming up. He put it in his pocket, and we went through the open gate onto campus. This was weird to us, because we remembered the security guard always locking it after all the extracurricular activities were over. Things were quiet, obviously, and we walked around all the buildings talking about our memories. The library was on the opposite side of campus from the admin building. and we spent some time out front of the library, drinking a bit of beer I had in my backpack. The sprinklers came on. It's about 2 a.m. at this point, so we decided to leave. We walked back to the entry gates, and on our way there, we noticed tire tracks in the sprinkler water on the concrete. We hadn't heard anything like a vehicle while we were chilling, but these tire tracks went all over the place. They seemed very erratic, but the width was skinny, like the golf cart the security guard used to get around campus. So that's what we chalked it up to. We got back to the entry gates, and now all the lights were off in the admin building, but there was a single car in the parking lot, trunk and doors wide open, but no one inside. That's when we hightailed it out of there. Something just didn't feel right about the situation. I still remember that realization that we were probably being watched. It seems absurd, I'm sure, but something about it freaks me out to this day.
I have had weird audio hallucinations since childhood. Usually when I'm working with my dad on a project of some kind, or trying to fix something, he laughs quite often. My brain just decides sometimes to imitate that laugh when I'm with him, so I hear him laugh. But he didn't laugh at all. I usually even see him smile if he's in my peripheral vision. But when I snap to it, he's not smiling nor laughing, and he can't recall laughing or smiling. I also hear footsteps in the attic sometimes, and this isn't a place for an attic dweller. I can tell you that. I've checked more than once just to be sure. Our attic is pretty high and has one entry. When I'm too tired, I can hear items talking to me when I go into a sort of a trance. You know, like when some sort of action is a little too comfortable, drying my hair, etc. And I start almost falling into sleep. Then I can hear a nearby item, a hairdryer for example, start talking to me. I make small talk, but everything happens in my mind until I snap back into reality and everything is normal again. It's creepy if it happens twice in one day, 10 minutes apart. I also have tinnitus, but the weirdest thing about it is this UFO sound I hear sometimes, like an extremely high-pitched sound that seems to be coming from the ceiling. No one in the house can hear it, just me. It changes in pitch, volume, and even direction. Sometimes it can come more from the right and change more to the left, etc. I also can hear certain ambient sounds that aren't there, usually the TV. It's really loud, then I open the door and go to turn it off, and it's off.
This happened to me in high school. It's a long story. I used to live right behind my old elementary school. One morning, I was on my way to drop off my little brother at the school. As we passed by the playground, there were cops surrounding a body bag. My first thought was someone got shot since we lived in the ghetto. Later that day, I was in class and my friend was crying. She said her best friend, Paul, took his own life and that he went to our school. He didn't sound familiar, but I didn't know a lot of people. She said he hung himself at the monkey bars at the elementary school I went to. It was his body I saw in the body bag. I would pass by the playground when I would walk home to pick up my brother, and I would always feel like someone was watching me. Shortly after that, they tore down the playground. Summer came around, and I would go and use the elementary school track to run. The track was right by the cafeteria windows, also by the self-termination spot. So as I passed while running, I noticed a guy at the window. He had a red and blue hat on. The cafeteria was dark, so I thought it was odd that someone was in there, especially in summer. I thought maybe it was a janitor, but he looked too young. He just stared with a blank face. I decided to walk to the front of the school because I didn't want to get in trouble for trespassing. As I was leaving, he wasn't at the window anymore. I walked past the area where the playground used to be and heard someone whisper by my ear, "Hey!" and laugh. I passed by the parking lot and there were no cars. I freaked out and began running back home. As I passed the window, there he was again, just staring. I didn't go back for a while. The next year, I had class with that same friend. On her binder, there was the same guy with that same hat and I asked her who that was. She said it was Paul, and he loved that hat because it was the school colors of the college he wanted to go to.
Raised by my grandmother from a young age, I would occasionally see shadows moving and hear weird sounds in the church Grandma cleaned. My sister was with my mum at the time, and we hadn't spoken for a while. One night, I was watching TV with Grandma. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw something swirling and green on the wall. It looked like a green tornado. Grandma panicked. Later, I heard her on the phone, angry at my mum. At the same time, my sister had seen a green fairy in her dark bedroom. My mother was an Eastern Star and affiliated with the OTO, and she performed chaos magic. Fast forward a few years, I was living with Mum, and my sister came and went. My sister was abused by her uncle. Mum performed a spell involving paper, water, candle wax, blood, alcohol, and other materials I can't mention. My uncle died of a heart attack on Mum's birthday the following month. Mum had actually killed people who wronged her family in this manner for many years. Fast forward to earlier this year. Mum had an aneurysm and passed away. She always said she'd die this way. I like to think she may have been redeemed in God's eyes because she repented and became a Christian in her last few years. In spite of all she's done, I loved her very much and miss her terribly.
I had been living in Tampa, and I was a student at USF. Halfway through my senior year, my life took a shit. My father met a gruesome fate in Kalamazoo. It's hard to walk into a place where someone you loved lived and see what was once part of them on the floor, rotting, with blood everywhere. I didn't sleep for like 2 months. Oh sure, I'd nod off, but the nightmares were too much, so sleep wasn't happening very often. I went back to Tampa totally fucked. I needed to take a break, but that was not in the cards for me. I tried to finish my degree. Money was a problem, and this was during the financial crisis, so jobs were... I did some left-handed shit. A guy I thought was my friend ratted me out. Later I learned he thought I was after his chick. I wasn't. She was a fat pillhead who talked like she was brain dead. Probably a trafficking abuse victim, I don't know. Things went bad. My lawyer was telling me I was facing 30 years. Those suits always lie to spook you. Well, I was spooked. So I dipped. My real friends helped me with a rental car because a plane seemed too risky. I was a mess. Stress will do it, LOL. I think I disassociated. I recall coming to on the highway just south of Atlanta with only the vaguest memory of the preceding days. Eventually, I made it home to Michigan. My family kind of sucks. All I heard from them was just turn yourself in, but I wasn't having that. I'm like a background character of sorts. I don't stick out. I'm nothing and nobody, invisible. So I figured I'd get into something. Some of my old friends whom I could trust helped me get around a bit. I had to find a place to lay low and come up with a plan. I was pretty broke because the cops in Tampa took about $25,000 worth of fun stuff from me, and I hadn't been able to shoot any moves since. On Craigslist, I found this place in Flint, and it was cheap. I walked into it for $395. My house payment was only $195 a month. The place was a dump. The spooks had ripped out the kitchen sink, and much of the aluminum siding was gone. But I was in a spot, so I had to roll with it. The north side of Flint is the belly of the beast. Where I was, in Merrill Hood as it was called, there were open-air crack sales 24/7 and plenty of gunfire. I got in the habit of occasionally pulling out my shit and popping off a few at random times, just to let them know WTF. It was all too easy. Maybe the realtor I hooked up with on Craigslist figured, fuck, if we don't sell this place to somebody, they're going to gut it, and then it won't be worth shit. Plus, land contract deals can be a way to make out on pieces of shit houses. There was no mention of the house's dark past from the realtors, and none of my neighbors told me anything either. When I first moved in, it was the dead of winter. I had no electricity, and that wouldn't come for a while. I was scared to put anything in my name. So there I was in this old piece of shit house in the dark. I was a mess. I'd been through a lot that year. The first few nights sleeping in the back bedroom, I swore I saw a small figure peek at me around the door frame. It was short, maybe 3.5 to 4 feet or so. I freaked out because I had locked all the doors. But I grabbed my flashlight and got up and checked everything. Nothing. The doors were all locked. I lay back down, and occasionally I would see this shadow again and glowing orb shapes out of the corner of my eye. I was freaked out, to be sure. I prayed and eventually pounded enough cheap beer to pass out. As time went on, my situation got better. Lights, etc. I began to identify parts of the house that felt menacing. There was a dark corner in the basement that scared the hell out of me. I wasn't scared of the little shadow person. It wasn't that scary, if that makes any sense. As the days turned into months and years, I eventually got stuff, couches, etc. Things began to happen. Shelves were falling over. A cupboard that I had screwed in came off the wall. Things would be moved around. I started to freak out because I began hearing stuff like laughing and screaming. I'd go to look, and there was nothing. One day, when a shelf flew over right in front of me, I ran out of the house and over to the church across the street, God's City. I asked the people I saw there who were associated with the church to get me the pastor because my house was haunted. Bear in mind, I knew nothing of the killings at this point. My realtor had omitted this from the sale. I must have looked nuts, but they were nice and came over, prayed a bit, and sprinkled some holy water around. I felt better. Eventually, I told one of the guys. He knew that I lived across the street where the weird shit was going on. He looked at me and laughed and said, "You know, 6 people were killed in your house, right?" I said, "No, I didn't know." No one told me my house had been the scene of multiple gruesome murders. He said the guy that did it was called the Preacher, and that was all he knew. I freaked out when one day there were balloons that said murder tied to my front porch.
This didn't happen to me, but it happened to the friend of my aunt-in-law. The aunt in question was one of the sweetest ladies you'll ever meet. But this woman was paranoid as hell. Not full schizo, mind you. She wasn't completely gone, but she'd lose her shit if her kids so much as visited their friends next door without her knowing, or if her sister got a drink with a new guy. My brother-in-law told me she was probably like that because of some shit that went down with a close friend of hers when they were in college. Her friend, whom I'll call M, was in a relationship with some druggie. He was a heroin addict who hid this from her until she moved into his apartment. But M wanted to stay with him to see if she could get him to seek help or check into rehab. Long story short, shit hits the fan, and they get into a huge fight one night. M says she'll be back to collect her things and goes to get dinner with my aunt-in-law. They have a long talk about what went down, and M seems really choked up about everything, bawling her eyes out, saying it was her fault, losing it over a guy that probably wasn't worth it. By the time they leave the restaurant, it's late, and M's aunt feels bad and offers to let her stay in her dorm for the night, which she does. They get drunk together, talk the night away, and pass out. The next afternoon, Em and my aunt head back to her ex's apartment to grab her stuff. The front door's unlocked, and the boyfriend is nowhere to be seen, and his car is gone. Apparently, he left her a note that said, "You're lucky you didn't come back." But that very well could have been my brother-in-law screwing with me. Still, they never heard from him again, and supposedly he was never found.
When I was in 6th grade, my family and I moved into this neighborhood that was a short walk away from what I guess was some kind of scrap yard. It was a dirt field full of old construction equipment, cement tunnels, old unlocked, damaged vehicles, rusting metal pipes, some tall enough to walk through, steel drums, and shit like that. It wasn't overflowing with junk, as it was pretty easy to get around if you were a hooligan of some kind, or a 12-year-old with too much free time. Also, it was pretty safe to assume the place was abandoned. There was never anyone there, let alone any cars parked nearby, and there were no signs near the area. It wasn't even fenced off. Naturally, as a stupid kid, I became pretty fascinated with this place and would make a point to walk over whenever I had time or interest. It allowed me to feel like an urban explorer for 10 minutes out of my day before I was too spooked to venture any further. Then there came a day when I found a bloodstain on the inner walls of one of the massive metal pipes. I was with a friend, showing them the area for the first time, and they pointed out this weird, deep red stain. Now, it wasn't fresh by any means, but it was very noticeably not the color of rust, and the insides of these pipes were relatively rust-free to begin with. It looked like something was struck in the area and bled out where they fell. It wasn't a lot, so part of me thought it was from a rabbit that got attacked in the yard, since they were borderline overpopulating the area at the time. But what really screws with me is the bone that we found sticking out of a small dirt mound at the far end of the yard. Looking back, yeah, it was probably some kind of animal, but we were stupid kids, so, of course, we got spooked and called the cops. I haven't gone back to the area since then.
I lived my first 12 years in my grandma's house in a small military village. Gramps was a lieutenant. I was around 7 years old when Dad started building a new house on the same piece of land and had just finished the roofless corridor that would connect the two houses. One night, I was playing at the new house. It was still not completed, so I needed to go to the other house by bedtime. After finishing playing, I was going through the corridor while looking at the floor. I did not know why, but I felt this strong feeling telling me not to raise my head or look at the walls. It felt like a warning. Of course, being a curious kid, I raised my head to look straight at the wall across the garden, where there was a lamp hanging. Right at that moment, I could see multiple faces and heads hanging on the wall, like their last expressions were of suffering, agony. But they would not move, as if they were killed and cut not long ago. Of course, I panicked, ran to my bedroom, and didn't open my eyes until the next morning. I never told this to anyone until much later. I don't really know why. Some years later, I guess I was 15 or something, we had a literature class where we had to read a book about local paranormal and creepy stuff around the city. As I was reading the book, one of the stories triggered my attention. It was about a group of people who could clearly hear cries of help, and sometimes see headless men or heads that would appear and vanish in a neighborhood. At first, I wasn't much impressed until I eventually remembered what happened to me, and it was frighteningly similar. My old village, I haven't lived there for 3 years now, was not far from that neighborhood. I started digging into research when I ironically found at the end part of the book a note by a local medium explaining that one of these spirits or something talked to him, explaining that they were lumberjacks who had their wood robbed by others who proceeded to behead them, and since that happened, they were not able to rest in peace.
I was on holiday and I went to this place that was supposed to be haunted, as lots of people died there. It was like these woods on a very tall mountain. Lots of people have fallen off the mountain or something, and there are lots of wild animals there. So my friends and I decided to go camping there. We were all just sitting when something jabbed me hard in the back and I fell down from my chair. I thought it was one of my friends behind me, but when I turned around, no one was there. That scared the shit out of all of us. Some of my friends thought I was just making all this up to scare them, so they still wanted to camp overnight. We were going to stay, but then one of my friends saw a pair of eyes in the dark, and we all looked, and it was a leopard. That really spooked us, and we left. I still don't know what jabbed me in the back though. It wasn't just a small tap, it was like someone got a sharp stick and prodded you in the ribs.
When I was 12, my family and I lived in a low-income complex. I attended Naval Cadets, and the leader of the Corps also lived in the same complex. We would get rides to drill, etc., with him and his wife, who was also in charge of the Corps. I forget their ranks. One evening, a group of kids from the complex and I were playing tag when we noticed his wife in the window of a bedroom. She was mouthing something to us, but we couldn't quite make it out. After a while, we figured she was saying, "Call 911. Being kids, we didn't think much of it and kept playing our game. A week later, His townhouse unit had been stormed by the police. He was arrested for murdering a prostitute who had allegedly threatened to tell his wife about his visits with her. A year later, the unit was vacant, and my sister had moved into our 2-bedroom. We needed another bedroom, and theirs had 3. So we moved in. Nothing abnormal happened until about a year and a half after moving in. I was asleep in my bed when something grabbed my foot and pulled me towards the end of the bed. I shouted in terror and sprung to the end of my bed to see who was messing with me. Nobody was there. Nobody could fit under my bed. It was a box spring and mattress on the ground. I never slept well in that place ever since.
The neighborhood I grew up in used to have a terrible coyote problem. Back in the day, the area I lived in was pretty sparse. I only had 2 neighbors, and they were a bit of a walk from where my family and I were. They were close enough to hear their kids playing around in the afternoon, but far enough that I'd never personally seen them. So, given that we weren't far from farmland in a densely wooded area, the coyotes didn't come as much of a surprise. To put it in perspective, almost every kid that walked to school or went to a bus stop before sunrise owned a can of mace in the event that they encountered one in the early morning. I never came face to face with one personally, as I'd usually only see them near the bushes or the woods, probably hunting rabbits or some shit. This said, there was one night where I woke up to some weird noises. I would usually fall asleep with the TV on in the background, so before I'm fully conscious, I assumed that's what I was hearing. However, I quickly realized that the glow of the screen wasn't filling my room, and my brain finally processed what I was hearing. Some scattered howls here and there, followed by a shrill yelping noise that sounded way too high-pitched to be a coyote, and it sounded so close. Being an 11-year-old at the time, it scared the hell out of me, but I eventually got back to sleep. It wasn't until I got home from school the next day that I found out what it was, as it was my mom who told me that she found the remains of a small dog not far from our driveway. Turns out our dipshit neighbors adopted a deformed, exotic pit bull a week or so back and thought it was a good idea to leave it on their screened-in porch during the nights. The little shit must have clawed its way through the rickety-ass door and had a run-in with the coyotes. Hearing it shrieking in the wee hours of the night really fucked with me as a kid.
Back in middle school, we had this really weird gym teacher, real standoffish kind of guy, not overtly creepy, but there was definitely something wrong about him. Like he was a pretty decent guy, hardly ever raised his voice, but he usually stayed within arm's length of most kids and never really looked anyone in the eye. I was in his class for 2 or 3 months before he just stopped showing up and was replaced with a new guy. Shortly after that, the news broke that this sick freak was arrested for the possession and sharing of illegal material, allegedly over 200,000 images over the course of many years, with some added photos of shirtless students from the basketball team he coached. He kept all this shit on a hard drive that was hidden in his ceiling and was put away in late 2009 for 11 years. For all I know, they could have let him out for good behavior, but I can't find anything on Google about it. The fact that I had been in the same room as this guy many times is still so surreal to me.
I was in a psych ward and things got worse. Then I was outside. All I did was drink some beers and yell at my parents for physically assaulting me when I was younger. Anyway, as I was walking to the lunchroom in the hospital, this girl came up to me and acted just like me. She told me things get sliced and edited when they are too close. As that happened, I saw an airplane outside of the window move backward as if in a glitch. As I got my food, she talked a mile a minute, and I can't remember what she said during. As we sat down, she told me to eat my starches first, and then everyone looked at me and I went blank, whited out. Never in my entire life has this happened, and I had never hallucinated ever. When I came to, I couldn't see anything but blurs and crystallized things which then formed into people. The crystals turned into another woman's hair and we started to move. I asked, "What is happening?" I was so terrified and decided and said, "Should I accept this?" And we started to dance. I feel pretty fucked up after, and it's hard to concentrate even after it being a year. I never told this to anyone because it sounds insane.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.